I am with the Shedster, and we are being Mr. and Mrs. Agile today because I just got permission to go straight in and ask a few curious questions because it's exciting times, Shed. So I'm delighted to have you.
That's what happens when you have sufficient relationship, is you can do things like that. Like, yeah, let's just go,
Let's just go. Let's
Uh,
just go.
so
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
happy to
Well,
happy to dive in and be agile with you, Rachel.
cool stuff. So next week, very exciting week. I'm thrilled for you. The
Thank
book's
you.
going to be out. I've got it on pre-order, so can't wait to have the whole hard copy on my shelves up there. I'll be showing you.
Here's a
Oh,
here's
go on.
here's a sneak peek.
Oh, that's so cool. So cool. So cool. Love it. Love
Thank
it.
you.
So
Thank you. Thank
very, very exciting stuff. Because I'm a curious girl
you.
and
Hmm.
I've got lots of questions for you, if that's okay.
Yes, I mean, I
Yeah.
am aware why I came today, so I'm very
Good.
happy to field any questions and hop
Good.
into a discussion and get your point of view as well.
Yeah, and as I'm sitting here in Central Europe, and we're all linguists here in Central Europe, and Europe's slightly different from North America, I thought I'd put my Europe, with your permission, I'll put my European energy on. Is that okay?
Yeah, I'll see if I can handle it.
Good. All right. So here's my question for you. Sometimes when I'm facilitating sessions and the term psychological safety comes up, there's a bit of pushback on the term
Hmm.
from Europeans, not the energy of what it is when they suddenly learn it. Is there a better term?
So, so I recently learned the story of why. So I consider Amy Edmondson a scholar, professor, author,
Yeah,
brilliant out
she's
of
brilliant.
Harvard.
Brilliant.
She's
Absolutely.
brilliant. Her work is brilliant, but she's also a kind and gracious human being. She endorsed the book. Thank you, Amy. Um, the reason she used the term psychological safety, she coined team psychological safety, which is still a freaking mouthful. But the
Yeah.
reason she used that term was I think it was the 1990s, she wrote a paper and
Yeah.
one of the reviewers said, "Oh, you're referring to psychological safety." Now, as a young, impressionable researcher, when a reviewer says, "This is what you're talking about," you say, "Yes, that is what I'm talking about. If it's going to get me published, sure, let's go with that." And so she fell into using psychological safety in what she coined team psychological safety, but she herself admits that it's a mouthful. It's not sexy. It can be misconstrued and misunderstood. It can be confused with safe spaces. And one of the biggest myths with psychological safety is that we wrap our folks in bubble wrap and in bubble paper, and it's about not hurting one another. That's not what psychological safety is. As Edmondson defines it, it's an environment in which we feel safe taking interpersonal risk. Um, now, I leaned into people don't buy drills, they buy holes. And I thought when I wrote this book, I fully thought, Rachel, that I was just rebranding psychological safety. But as it turns out, there's something else that I'm talking about. So people don't buy
Tell
drills.
us about
Yeah.
that. And
So
tell
people,
us it so my mum would understand. Because
I'll try.
she's from the north of England, so you've got to say it
Okay.
right.
So people don't buy drills, they buy holes. If psychological safety is the drill, what you get as a result is a speak up culture, an environment in which people feel that it is safe and worth it to speak up with their ideas, their feedback, their concerns, their disagreements, and even admit mistake, believing all of that will yield a positive outcome and they won't be ignored or punished.
Right.
The distinction that I made, a good friend of mine, as I was writing, I shared the first 3 chapters with her, and she said, "Are you writing different things or are you writing things differently?" And I went, "Ooh." And at
That's
first,
different.
it was, yeah, Tiziana Casciaro, who wrote, what's the book called? Something with Power for All, I think. When I first started writing, I thought I was writing things differently. But as it turns out, I might actually be writing some different things because I call it a speak up culture.
Mm.
And the 2 ingredients of a speak up culture is, yes, it feels safe, psychologically safe to take a risk, and it feels worth it. So if I dare speak up and share an idea with you, feedback for you, a concern I have, a disagreement with your point of view, especially if you're more senior to me in the hierarchy of an organization or a dynamic, or I admit mistake, do I believe that risk, because it never is without fear when speaking up, it's about leaders creating less fear. But do I feel safe, and do I feel that it's worth it? Will it yield a positive outcome?
So this is really interesting. So in Europe and in some European cultures, you probably know that there's still some hierarchy in the cultures. What advice?
Which is human, by the way, which is
Yeah,
human. Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So what advice would you be giving to leaders in those organizations that are curious and want to create a speak up culture?
So hierarchy is this really interesting human phenomena where the more senior one is, we are biologically wired to offer them more deference. And the reason is because they have power and authority over us. So when the CEO walks in the room, particularly if it's an organization larger than 15 folks, right? And as you get to 60, and now we're talking hundreds and thousands, you notice when that person walks in and you sit up straighter. Hello, ma'am. Hello, sir, whatever it might be. We're biologically wired to offer them deference. As a leader, our whisper is a shout and our tiptoes are stomps. And as a leader, we are at risk of being separated or further away from the truth, or anything that is delivered to us is massaged, because we are biologically wired to offer deference, and it takes a risk to speak up. So a few things. One, all great leaders surround themselves with at least 1, 2 more folks who are trusted confidants and remind them that their feet still stink. And I've seen leaders who were previously excellent or good enough change who they surround themselves with, only surround themselves with yes people, and they become awful and toxic because we're fallible. We can't see everything. It's hard to read the label on the jar where we're inside of the jar. And so leaders must surround themselves by people who say, hey, you just messed up, or you just hurt someone's feelings, or did you notice what you just said? Or I don't think that decision's going to work for so-and-so, or this level, or whatever it might be. So that's one, is surround yourself with people who will dish you the unfiltered truth with tact and respect and care, but will dish it. The other is create, if you can, as much informality as possible. So we've seen this in operating rooms with doctors, and they say, don't call me doctor, call me Muhammad, or call me Nancy, right? Call me by my first name. I will call you by your first name. We're a team. I need to know what you see, right? This can happen in the cockpit as well, particularly in some cultures where we offer a ton of deference to a more senior pilot. Korean Airlines, they no longer speak Korean, the language in the cockpit, because there are subtleties and hierarchies and formalities in the language. They've trained their pilots to speak American English so that they're more likely to challenge authority, because, deference and not speaking up is fine for your father-in-law, not so good when you're responsible for the lives of 200, 300 people. So they've actually created a different system. Create more informality, create vulnerability, call me by my first name. I need to know what you see, and then encourage folks to speak up and reward them when they do, especially when they share hard news or bad news to hear. It's not license, there's a sweet spot. I didn't put this in the book, Rachel, but I've just learned it. In the middle, there's speak up culture, like a sweet spot. It's productive. On one end, there's sucking up. No, that's not a speak up culture. That's just you hogging air because it's rewarded around here to speak up. No. On the other end, I haven't found the right term for it, so maybe we can crowdsource a term here. It's not a hall pass to be an absolute jerk. It's not a hall pass to throw out tact, respect, decency, situational awareness, or emotional intelligence. You can still reward people for the intent, but coach them on the behavior and on the impact of how they spoke up, when they spoke up, who was there, all of that. So there's a sweet spot, and we can coach on the other ends of that spectrum.
Cool. So is there an organization out there that you think has a brilliant speak up culture, Shed?
No. I mean, I'm very hesitant to label any organization because organizations are dynamic. And I think a great example is Microsoft. So
Yeah.
Microsoft, huge organization. So for me to say Microsoft has a speak up culture, it's like, well, like what if you work for a manager who doesn't create a speak up culture? Or to say that all leaders are for all people, come on, there are some folks who are great leaders for some, but not for others, or maybe you're not in the right role or whatever it might be. But if you I'm more quick to evaluate leaders than to label companies. So Microsoft under Bill Gates, dorky, nerdy, but quite innovative, and if you're innovative, it means that you can challenge authority, you can disagree, you can dissent, you have a tolerance for failure, all signs of a good speak up culture. Microsoft under Steve Ballmer, a little bit more short-term minded, finite minded, highly competitive. If you brought bad news, you were the problem. Not a speak up culture. The head of the organization shifted that culture. And now Microsoft under Satya Nadella, I like what I'm hearing and seeing, model coach care, or a learn it all, not a know it all culture. I'm like, okay, reinvigorating the soul of Microsoft as he sees what his job is. And I'm like, I like where that's going. But to say, label Microsoft as a speak up culture. Well, how would that feel if you're on a Zoom call with a nasty boss or a misogynistic boss or whatever it might be, and you have a forced Zoom background saying Microsoft is a speak up culture? It's like, not for me. So I don't label organizations, I evaluate leaders.
Very good. So in the book, so for anybody who's going out and everybody out there, get this book because I know it's going to be an incredible.
At least 3 copies. You have to. It's
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. What do you hope readers are going to take away from the book, Shed? What is one of the big things that you hope people are going to take away?
I think so. I fully admit, Rachel, that I've written a philosophy book disguised as a business book. This is the change that I want to see in the world. And I focus on business because I know business. And I think that we can have scale and impact, that if we change how we feel where we work, it bleeds positively or negatively, right? And I think that the one thing I'd impart and really love for folks to take to heart is the thesis, which is leaders make it safe and make it worth it for the people around them to speak up. And by leaders, I don't necessarily mean capital L leaders, meaning you have the title. I mean lowercase l leaders. And we can all choose to study and learn what does it mean to behave as a leader and then commit to those behaviors. And there's no better thing being called a leader by those who follow you rather than just putting it in your title. So make it safe and make it worth it. We can do that at home. We can do that with our friends. We can do that in our community. And we need more of that healthy discourse. But, my book isn't speak up all the time everywhere. No, sometimes it's not safe and it's not worth it. And I've been in those environments. So pick your spots and do all that you can do to make it safe and worth it for the people around you to speak up. I want to live in that world.
Very good. Thank you so much, Shed, for joining us today. And really hope all of you here in Europe buy Shed's book because I know it's going to be absolutely fantastic. Thanks so much, Shed.
Thank you.